The sliding glass doors of Mercy General Hospital exploded inward at exactly 10:07 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday night in November. Not opened. Exploded. 300 pounds of muscle and scar tissue crashed through the entrance, like a freight train derailed from reality. The man who emerged from the rain-soaked Chicago darkness had to duck his head to clear the doorframe. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, his torn army jacket stretched tight across a chest that seemed built to stop bullets. A jagged scar ran from his left eyebrow down to his lip, splitting his face into a roadmap of violence and survival. But it was his eyes that turned the emergency room into a frozen tableau of pure terror. Wild, darting, searching desperately for something that existed only in the battlefield of his fractured mind. "Where is she?" His voice was thunder trapped inside a human throat, rattling the glass partition of the reception desk. "Meredith, where is she?" The waiting room went dead silent. A baby stopped crying mid-wail, as if even infants could sense the danger. An elderly woman in the corner clutched her rosary beads and began whispering prayers she hadn't said since childhood. Security guard Paul Martinez was a retired Chicago cop who had seen 30 years on the South Side. He had faced down gang members, drug dealers, and desperate men with nothing left to lose. He stepped forward with his baton raised, 200 pounds of experience and authority. The giant didn't even look at him. One backhand. That's all it took. Paul flew backward into a crash cart, scattering sterile medical equipment across the polished floor like shrapnel from a bomb. Metal trays clattered and rang against the tiles. Young Dave, the part-time college student working security to pay his tuition, lasted exactly 2 seconds longer. The giant grabbed him by his vest, lifted him one-handed as if he weighed nothing at all, and tossed him aside like a bag of dirty laundry. Dave slid across the floor and hit the far wall with a sickening thud. Chaos erupted. Nurses screamed and scattered like startled birds. Patients scrambled over plastic chairs to reach the exits. Dr. Pierce Whitmore, the attending physician whose ego could barely fit through the double doors on a good day, backed away so fast he collided with a medication cart and sent pill bottles rolling across the floor. The giant ripped a metal IV pole from its wheeled stand and raised it like a baseball bat, his massive arms corded with muscle. "Get down! Everyone get down! Incoming! Mortars! They're hitting the perimeter!" He wasn't seeing Chicago anymore. Behind those wild, desperate eyes, bombs were falling on a dusty compound half a world away. Enemies were everywhere, and somewhere in the smoke and fire of his shattered mind, a woman named Meredith was waiting to be saved. He had been searching for her for 3 long years. In the midst of this absolute chaos, an unlikely figure stepped forward. Serafina Valdez was 28 years old, barely 5'4", and swimming in scrubs that were at least 2 sizes too big for her slight frame. Her brown hair was pulled back in a messy clip that always seemed seconds away from falling out completely. She had been scolded by her supervisor for trembling hands just 1 hour earlier. She didn't run like the others. She walked straight toward the giant, and what she did next would freeze every person in that hospital with disbelief. Exactly 1 hour before the world exploded, Serafina Valdez had been completely invisible. The fluorescent lights of Mercy General's emergency department flickered with that headache-inducing hum that only night shift workers truly understand. Cold November rain hammered against the ambulance bay doors outside, and gusts of wind rattled the metal frames like something desperate trying to get inside. "Sarah, for God's sake, move faster!" The sharp voice of head nurse Patricia Walsh cut through the low murmur of the ER like a knife through butter. Patricia was 50 years old, deeply cynical, and moved with the brutal efficiency of someone who had witnessed every tragedy Chicago could possibly offer and had liked none of it. Serafina flinched visibly at the sound of her own name. "I'm sorry, Patricia. I just wanted to make sure the saline ratios were correctly." I don't pay you to double-check ratios the pharmacy already verified. Patricia snatched a medical chart from the counter, her eyes narrowing with undisguised irritation. You've been here exactly 3 weeks, Valdez. 3 weeks. And you're still moving around like you're terrified the floor might bite your ankles. Dr. Whitmore keeps asking me why I hired you in the first place. Sarah nodded meekly, her face flushing deep crimson with embarrassment. She didn't argue back. She never argued back. Since arriving at Mercy General Hospital, Serafina Valdez had been a ghost in every sense of the word. She ate her lunch alone in her beat-up Honda Civic in the parking garage. She never once joined the other nurses for drinks after their shifts ended. When the serious trauma cases rolled in through those ambulance bay doors, the car wrecks, the gunshot wounds, the gritty life and death stuff that made this hospital famous, Sarah always seemed to fade into the background, handling paperwork or quietly restocking supply cabinets while everyone else rushed to save lives. The general consensus among the staff was crystal clear. Sarah Valdez was soft, a complete hospitality hire, someone who belonged in a quiet suburban dermatology clinic somewhere, not the inner-city meat grinder of a level 1 trauma center in downtown Chicago. "Would you look at her?" Dr. Pierce Whitmore whispered conspiratorially to a young resident near the coffee machine. He gestured dismissively with his cup towards Sarah, who was struggling to unlock a supply cabinet across the room. "She's actually shaking, literally trembling. If a real bleeder comes through those doors tonight, that girl's going to faint dead away. Mark my words." The resident chuckled quietly. "Maybe she's just cold from the weather." "She's scared," Whitmore said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Pure and simple. Some people are built for this work, and some people aren't. Natural selection. She's prey, plain and simple. In the wild, she would be eaten alive in 5 minutes flat." Sarah heard every single word from across the room. She had ears like a bat, though she always pretended not to hear the whispered insults and the mocking laughter. She had learned long ago that invisibility was a form of armor. Let them underestimate her. Let them see exactly what she wanted them to see. What absolutely no one in that emergency room noticed, what no one ever seemed to notice, was what happened whenever Serafina Valdez thought she was truly alone. Earlier that evening, a burly construction worker named Mike had come into the ER with a nasty laceration across his palm. Nothing too serious, completely routine, just another Tuesday night injury. As Sarah carefully cleaned his wound under Patricia's watchful and disapproving gaze, her hands trembled noticeably. The head nurse clicked her tongue with impatience before walking away to answer a ringing telephone. The moment Patricia's back was turned, something remarkable happened. Sarah's hands stopped shaking entirely, not because she suddenly relaxed, but because she no longer needed to maintain the performance. Her movements became impossibly fluid, precise, almost mechanical in their perfection. She wrapped Mike's bandage with a speed and symmetry that would have deeply impressed even a seasoned combat field surgeon. Mike looked down at his perfectly dressed wound with wide, surprised eyes. "Damn, nurse, that was incredibly fast. You've definitely done this before, haven't you?" Sarah blinked rapidly, as if suddenly waking from some kind of trance. She immediately hunched her shoulders again, slipping back into her mousy, nervous persona, like pulling on a familiar coat. "Oh, just a little practice in nursing school. Nothing special." She scurried away before Mike could ask any follow-up questions. The tremble in her hands had never been fear. It was restraint. The ambulance radio crackled urgently to life at exactly 9:52 p.m. "Mercy Base, this is Unit 42. We are inbound, ETA, approximately 3 minutes. We picked up a walk-in off 5th and Main. Male, approximately early 40s. Highly agitated, possibly psychotic, break, or substance abuse. He's big. I mean really, really big. Vital signs are stable, but he is completely non-compliant." There was a brief pause filled with static. Then the nervous paramedic continued. His military dog tags identify him as Hawkins Dominic, former Army. He keeps asking for someone named Meredith. He seems to think he's back overseas somewhere. Be advised we could not safely restrain him. He's walking in on his own. Sarah's blood turned to ice in her veins. Meredith Hawkins. She knew that name. She knew it intimately. 3 years ago, at a forward operating base in the Syrian desert, there had been a nurse named Meredith Hawkins serving with the Army Medical Corps. Warm smile that could light up even the darkest field hospital. Gentle, capable hands that had held countless dying soldiers in their final moments. The kind of person who made everyone around her feel safe just by existing. Meredith had died in the same catastrophic explosion that killed Sarah's entire Special Operations Medical Unit. Sarah had been there. She had carried the bodies. Patricia's impatient voice snapped her violently back to the present moment. Valdez, stop daydreaming. Take Bay 2. If he gets rowdy, just call for security backup. And for heaven's sake, don't try to be a hero. 15 long minutes later, Sarah found herself standing exactly 30 feet from a 7-foot giant who had just hospitalized 2 security guards and was now cornering Dr. Whitmore against a wall with an IV pole raised high above his head, ready to deliver a killing blow. She noticed the military dog tag swinging wildly from his thick neck, the faded tattoo barely visible on his wrist. 75th Ranger Regiment. The way he moved, not stumbling like a drunk, but tactically checking corners and watching his flanks even in his delusional state. And suddenly, with absolute clarity, she understood everything. This man wasn't a random psychotic. This wasn't a drug-fueled rampage. This was a decorated combat veteran trapped in a horrific flashback, desperately searching for a wife who would never come home to him again. Because Sarah had been there the day Meredith died, and now fate had brought Meredith's broken husband crashing through those hospital doors. Sergeant Hawkins! Sarah's voice cracked through the chaos like a rifle shot, cutting through the screams and the noise with surgical precision. It wasn't the trembling whisper of a nervous rookie nurse anymore. This voice was sharp, clear, commanding, projected from deep in her diaphragm with the unmistakable authority of someone who had commanded soldiers in the worst places on earth. The giant froze mid-swing. The heavy metal IV pole hovered just inches from Dr. Whitmore's terrified face. The doctor was openly sobbing, pressed flat against the wall with his hands raised in useless surrender. The use of his rank, sergeant, cut through the thick fog in the giant's brain like a blade. Just for a moment. He spun around violently, searching for the source of that commanding voice. His wild eyes found a small woman in oversized blue scrubs, standing in the middle of the emergency room. Everyone else was hiding behind furniture or had fled entirely, but she was walking toward him. Identify yourself, he barked, immediately lowering his center of gravity into a fighting stance, ready to attack. State your unit and purpose. Corpsman up, Sarah shouted back without hesitation. The words were very specific. The battlefield call for a medic to advance to a wounded position, a phrase that had been burned into this soldier's muscle memory through years of brutal combat deployments. His name was Dominic the Bull Hawkins. He was 42 years old, a former Delta Force sergeant who had been awarded the Silver Star for extraordinary valor under fire. 3 years ago, his wife Meredith, a dedicated Army nurse serving at a forward operating base in Syria, had died in a massive explosion that was never supposed to happen. He had been trying to find her ever since, in his nightmares, in his waking delusions, in every shadow and every stranger's face. Stand down, Ranger, Sarah commanded, her voice now hard as forged iron. She took another deliberate step closer, her hands open and visible at chest level. Non-threatening, but ready. We are currently in the green zone. The perimeter is fully secure. You are flagging a friendly with that weapon. Lower it immediately. Dominic shook his massive head violently, still fighting the terrible visions flooding his mind. No! 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 They're coming! The insurgents have breached the perimeter. I have to find Meredith. She's out there somewhere. She needs me. Meredith is safe, Sergeant. The lie came smoothly. It had to. Lives depended on it. Sarah stepped even closer. 5 feet now. She was well within his striking range. One swing of that heavy metal pole would shatter every bone in her small body. I just radioed command directly. Meredith is already at the landing zone. She's safe and waiting for you there. But you know the protocol, Sergeant. You cannot approach her while carrying a weapon. Standard procedure. Something in Dominic's face began to crack. The blind rage slowly gave way to something far more devastating. Raw, unbearable grief. I couldn't protect her, he choked out, his deep voice breaking. A single tear cut a clean line through the dried blood and grime on his weathered cheek. The explosion. I dug through that rubble for 3 hours straight. My hands were bleeding down to the bone. And when I finally found her, Sarah's heart shattered into pieces inside her chest. She had been there that terrible day. She had seen the smoking rubble. She had helped pull the broken bodies from the wreckage. And she knew a secret that would destroy this man completely if he ever learned the truth. Meredith Hawkins had died saving Sarah's life. "You're not slow, Sergeant," Sarah said softly, allowing her voice to shift from commanding to genuinely comforting. She took another careful step forward. 2 feet away now. She had to crane her neck back to look up into his haunted eyes. "You were never slow. The fight is over now. Weapon down. That's an order." She reached out with a trembling hand, not trembling from fear this time, but from the sheer adrenaline coursing through her system, and gently touched the cold steel of the IV pole. "Give it to me, Sergeant. I've got you. You're safe now." For one eternal heartbeat, the entire emergency room suspended in absolute silence. 50 people held their breaths simultaneously. Dominic's white-knuckled grip on the pole slowly loosened. He searched Sarah's eyes desperately for any sign of deception, any hint of a trap. "Is everyone safe?" he whispered brokenly. "Did everyone make it out?" "All clear," Sarah said gently. "Everyone's safe." "You did good, Sergeant." He released the pole. Sarah carefully lowered it to the floor. The elevator doors dinged loudly behind them. 2 Chicago police officers burst out into the ER with their service weapons drawn, shouting at maximum volume. "Police! Drop the weapon! Get on the ground right now!" The sudden explosive noise completely shattered the fragile reality that Sarah had so carefully constructed. Dominic's eyes snapped wide open with renewed terror. The police officers weren't friendlies in his fractured mind. They were an enemy ambush force. The green zone had vanished when he was back in the war. "Ambush!" he screamed at the top of his lungs. "Contact front!" He didn't reach for the discarded IV pole. He reached for Sarah. In his broken mind, she had suddenly transformed into the enemy, a spy who had cleverly tricked him into lowering his guard. His massive hand, easily the size of a catcher's mitt, closed around her slender throat like a vice. He lifted her completely off the ground as if she weighed absolutely nothing. "Traitor!" he roared with terrible fury. "You set me up!" "Shoot him! Shoot him right now!" Dr. Whitmore screamed hysterically from where he was still cowering against the wall. The 2 police officers hesitated badly, their weapons wavering. They couldn't get a clean shot without risking hitting the nurse, who was now dangling helplessly in the giant's grip. Sarah hung suspended in the air, her feet kicking uselessly several inches above the floor. Her vision began spotting with black dots as the oxygen was crushed from her lungs. The pressure on her windpipe was absolutely immense. She could feel her larynx beginning to collapse. He was going to crush her throat completely in a matter of seconds. But Serafina Valdez did not panic. Her face was turning deep purple from oxygen deprivation, but her eyes remained absolutely laser-focused. She didn't claw desperately at his hands like a helpless victim would. She reached very deliberately for his thumb. In one blindingly fluid motion, she swung her legs upward and wrapped them tightly around Dominic's massive bicep to gain leverage. She isolated his thumb from the rest of his grip, bent it sharply backward against the natural joint, and simultaneously drove her elbow with devastating force into the bundle of sensitive nerves in his inner forearm. Krav Maga, Israeli military close-quarters combat, executed with the lethal precision of someone who had trained extensively with Tier 1 special operations units. Dominic roared in sudden agony, his iron grip involuntarily released. Sarah dropped to the floor in a heap, gasping desperately for air. But she didn't retreat. She didn't scramble away like any sane person would have. As Dominic stumbled backward, clutching his injured arm, he swung a wild haymaker punch directly at her head, a blow that would have killed her instantly. She ducked smoothly under the punch, pivoting on her left heel with practiced grace. She moved fluidly behind his massive frame, delivered a precise kick to the back of his knee to buckle his leg, and locked her arm around his thick neck before he could recover. She wasn't choking him. That would take far too long with someone his size. She was applying a precise vascular sleeper hold, pressing her carotid arteries against his with expert pressure, cutting off the blood flow to his brain with surgical accuracy. "Sleep, Sergeant," she rasped directly into his ear, her voice straining with the enormous effort of controlling 300 pounds of thrashing, panicked muscle. "Just sleep now. I've got you. You're safe." Dominic bucked and thrashed like a wild bronco, completely desperate to throw her off. He slammed his back violently against the nearest wall, trying to crush her between his massive body and the unforgiving surface. Sarah grunted in pain but held on with iron determination. She wrapped her legs tightly around his waist and locked her ankles together. The hooks were fully set. She was attached to him like a lethal backpack. 10 seconds of violent struggle. 20 seconds. His frantic thrashing gradually slowed. His arms fell limply to his sides. His massive legs finally gave out beneath him. Sarah rode him all the way down to the floor, maintaining the precise hold until his entire body went completely slack. She immediately checked his pulse, strong and steady, then released him and rolled away across the cold tile, gasping for breath and gingerly massaging her badly bruised throat. The emergency room was dead silent. 50 pairs of eyes stared at her in complete disbelief. Patricia Walsh slowly rose from behind the reception desk, where she had been hiding. Her face was pale as a ghost. "Sarah," she whispered. "Who are you? What just happened?" Sarah looked down at her own hands. They were shaking again. She looked at the unconscious giant sprawled on the floor, at the military dog tag still hanging from his neck, glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. "He needs 10 milligrams of haloperidol and 2 of Ativan for sedation," she said hoarsely, her voice raspy from the choking. "And get a cardiac monitor on him immediately. He's showing signs of arrhythmia." She pushed herself unsteadily to her feet, completely ignoring the dozens of stunned stares following her every movement. "I need to use the bathroom." She walked away through the double doors without answering Patricia's question. But the nightmare was only beginning. The PA system crackled urgently to life exactly 45 minutes later. "Code black. Main entrance. Repeat, code black." Code black at Mercy General meant one of two things: either a bomb threat or a mass casualty event involving VIPs. Either way, it meant the entire hospital was being immediately locked down. Sarah froze in the supply closet where she had been hiding and trying to collect her thoughts. Her heart began hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. 6 men in full tactical combat gear poured through the main entrance in perfect formation. Black uniforms, tactical helmets with night vision mounts, military-grade assault rifles held at the ready across their chests. They moved with the fluid, deadly precision of elite special operators, fanning out to secure the hospital perimeter in complete professional silence. Behind them walked a man who radiated absolute command authority. He wore an immaculately pressed army dress uniform, the chest heavy with rows of colorful campaign ribbons. 3 silver stars gleamed on each shoulder. General Victor Ashford, 62 years old, one of the most powerful men in the United States military. Dr. Whitmore's clipboard clattered loudly to the floor. He had made a frantic phone call to a colonel contact at the Pentagon barely an hour ago, asking questions about the mysterious nurse with impossible combat skills. A 3-star general personally showing up in the middle of the night meant this situation was way, way above his pay grade. Who is the attending physician in charge here? Ashford's voice wasn't particularly loud, but it carried to every corner of the emergency room with unmistakable authority. Dr. Whitmore stepped forward, pathetically trying to look important and in control. I am, sir. Dr. Pierce Whitmore. General, I presume you're here regarding the prisoner, Sergeant Hawkins? I'm here for my man. Yes. Ashford's cold eyes swept across the room like searchlights. Show me the security footage of what happened. Detective Roy Callahan, a 60-year-old Chicago police veteran with tired eyes that had witnessed every possible lie the city could offer, stepped forward and held up a tablet displaying the security camera recording of the violent confrontation. General Ashford watched the footage intently. He watched the small nurse walk calmly toward the raging giant. He watched her execute the textbook psychological de-escalation using precise military terminology. He watched the flawless chokehold takedown. The color slowly drained from his weathered face. Rewind that, he commanded sharply. Zoom in on her face. Callahan pinched the screen to enlarge. Sarah's pixelated face filled the entire frame. Ashford let out a long breath he seemed to have been holding for years. Where is she? His voice had changed completely. Where is this nurse right now? Probably hiding somewhere in the building, Whitmore sneered, still trying to regain some dignity. I told you already, General. That woman is obviously a complete fraud. Her entire personnel file is fabricated. The reference phone numbers are fake. She's clearly some kind of... Ashford grabbed Whitmore by the lapels of his pristine white lab coat and yanked him close with surprising strength. The general's eyes blazed with an intensity that made the arrogant doctor's knees physically buckle. That woman is not a fraud, Ashford said in a low, dangerous voice. If she is who I think she is the only reason every single person in this room is still breathing tonight. You have absolutely no idea what just walked into your hospital. Who is she? Whitmore stammered pathetically. She's called the Ghost. Ashford released him roughly. And she's supposed to be dead. He turned to address his tactical team. Search every floor. Lock down all exits immediately. Find her. Now. Sarah watched everything unfold from a narrow crack in the supply closet door. Her heart was pounding so hard she was certain they could hear it. She knew General Victor Ashford. She had served directly under his command in Syria. She was the one who had personally pulled him from a burning Humvee in Damascus when his entire security detail was wiped out in an ambush. She had saved his life. She was also the one who had completely disappeared from existence 3 years ago. Because she had learned the truth about Operation Sandstorm, her phone buzzed silently in her scrub pocket. Unknown number. Hello, she whispered. Serafina Valdez, or whatever name you're using these days. The voice on the other end was electronically distorted, completely unrecognizable. Look up at the security camera. She looked at the small camera mounted in the corner of the hallway outside. Its red recording light was blinking steadily. Who is this? Consider me a friend. Listen very carefully because we don't have much time. The general isn't there to arrest you tonight, but the men who came with him, they're not regular army. They're black talent, private military contractors, mercenaries. If they manage to capture Dominic Hawkins, he's a dead man. If they capture you, you're dead too. Why? What's going on? Because you both know far too much about what really happened in Aleppo, about Operation Sandstorm, about Meredith Hawkins. Sarah's blood ran ice cold. That was a terrorist ambush, she whispered. Insurgents attacked our position. It was in all the reports. It wasn't an ambush. It was a carefully orchestrated assassination. Meredith Hawkins discovered that someone high up was running an illegal weapons smuggling operation through your forward operating base. She was gathering evidence to report it through proper channels. So they leaked your unit's exact position to the enemy and let them do the dirty work. Meredith was the primary target. Your entire team was just acceptable collateral damage. That's impossible. The man who gave that order is standing in that hospital right now. His name is Raven. He commands Black Talon's wet work division. The general? He's being blackmailed because he unknowingly signed off on Sandstorm without understanding what it really was. Now Raven is cleaning house, eliminating all loose ends, and you and Hawkins are the loosest ends still alive. Sarah gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. You have approximately 30 seconds before they breach that closet door. Wake up, Hawkins. Get to the basement elevator. Go now. The line went dead. Through the crack in the door, she could see one of the tactical operators moving steadily toward her position, his weapon raised and ready. Sarah kicked the closet door open and burst out into the hallway. She didn't run away from the danger. She ran directly toward it. The basement morgue level was pitch black and freezing cold. Black Talon had already cut the main power to the lower floors. The only illumination came from dim red emergency bulbs mounted along the ceiling, casting long, bloody shadows down the concrete corridor like trails of gore leading into darkness. Dominic moved beside Sarah through the gloom, blood steadily soaking through the back of his jacket from 2 bullet wounds he had taken while shielding her body from the first volley of gunfire upstairs. He was operating now on nothing but pure adrenaline and rage. They're running night vision equipment, Sarah whispered urgently. We're completely blind down here. We need to even the odds somehow. She quickly scanned their surroundings. Her eyes landed on a large steam pipe running along the ceiling. Industrial grade. High pressure. Extremely hot. Dominic, can you rip that pipe off the wall? He looked at it and almost smiled. Easy. When I give you the signal, break it open. Fill this entire corridor with steam. Their thermal imaging will completely white out. They won't be able to see anything. Heavy footsteps echoed ominously from the far end of the hallway. The tactical team had bypassed the elevator and was advancing down the stairwell. 4 green laser sights cut through the darkness like predatory eyes. Target acquired, a voice crackled over a radio. End of the corridor. Engaging now. Now, Sarah screamed. Dominic grabbed the steam pipe with both massive hands and wrenched it downward with a roar that echoed off the concrete walls. A jet of scalding white steam exploded into the corridor with the deafening force of a jet engine. The entire hallway was engulfed in a thick, searing cloud within seconds. I can't see anything. Thermal is completely whited out. I'm blind, one of the mercenaries shouted in panic. Goggles are useless. Switch to... Sarah didn't retreat. She advanced directly into the steam. She was a ghost moving through fog. The first mercenary was frantically trying to wipe his useless goggles when she materialized beside him like a phantom. A surgical scalpel flashed in her hand. His Achilles tendon parted cleanly. Before he could even scream in pain, the handle of the scalpel drove into his temple with precise force. He collapsed silently. Sarah caught his falling assault rifle and hurled it back toward Dominic through the steam. Suppressing fire, I need cover. Even badly wounded and operating blind, Dominic Hawkins was still a trained marksman. 3 controlled bursts from the rifle. 3 bodies hit the floor. Clear, he shouted. Negative, not clear yet. Sarah emerged from the dissipating steam and checked the tactical radio on the lead mercenary's vest. Their comms are still active. The rest of the team knows exactly where we are now. We need to move. Loading dock. Go. They ran together through the darkness, past the cold silver drawers of the morgue, the sharp smell of formaldehyde mixing with the metallic tang of blood and dissipating steam. Cold rain poured down in sheets as they emerged from the hospital's basement level onto the loading dock ramp. A blinding spotlight immediately hit them full in the face. Blocking the only exit was a heavily armored black SUV. Standing in front of it, flanked by two more heavily armed mercenaries, was General Victor Ashford. He held a pistol in his hand, but it was pointed down at the wet ground rather than at them. Standing slightly behind the general was another man. This one held a high-powered sniper rifle leveled directly at Sarah's head. His finger rested on the trigger. Raven. He was approximately 45 years old, with the flat, dead eyes of someone who had stopped being fully human a very long time ago. "It's over, Ghost," Ashford shouted over the pounding rain. "There's nowhere left to go. The police have the outer perimeter completely locked down, but my men control everything inside. Lower your weapons." Sarah stood her ground on the rain-slicked concrete, supporting Dominic, who was beginning to sway badly from blood loss and shock. "General," she shouted back, "you know what really happened in Aleppo. You signed off on Operation Sandstorm. But did you know that Raven here personally leaked our unit's position to the enemy? Did you know that Meredith Hawkins discovered his weapons smuggling operation and was murdered to keep her quiet?" General Ashford's weathered face went deathly pale in the harsh spotlight. He turned very slowly to look at Raven. "Is that the truth?" His voice was barely audible over the rain. Raven smiled coldly, a mechanical expression with absolutely no warmth or humanity behind it. "You still don't understand the situation, do you, General? You stopped being the client a long time ago. Now you're just another liability that needs to be cleaned up." In one smooth motion, he raised his sidearm and shot Victor Ashford directly in the chest. The three-star general crumpled to the wet asphalt, a look of complete shock frozen on his face as he fell. "Kill them both," Raven ordered his remaining men calmly. "Clean sweep. No witnesses." Dominic Hawkins made a sound that wasn't entirely human. It was the primal roar of a man who had already lost everything that mattered and now had absolutely nothing left to lose. He shoved Sarah roughly behind a thick concrete support pillar and charged directly into the line of fire. Bullets sparked and ricocheted off his tactical vest. They spun him. They staggered his massive frame. But they didn't stop him. 300 pounds of pure momentum hit the two remaining guards like a runaway freight train. The sound of the impact was sickening. Bones shattered audibly. Bodies flew through the air. Raven tried to adjust his sniper rifle's aim, but Dominic was already right on top of him. The giant grabbed the barrel of the rifle with one massive hand and bent it upward with brute force just as Raven pulled the trigger. The shot went wild, shattering a street lamp overhead. Dominic head-butted him with devastating force. Raven collapsed to the wet ground, unconscious before his body even finished falling. But the giant didn't stop moving forward. He stumbled badly. His legs finally gave out completely beneath him. He fell heavily to his knees on the wet asphalt, gasping for breath. Dark blood pouring steadily from multiple wounds that would have killed any normal man. "Dominic!" Sarah sprinted out from cover and slid across the rain-slicked pavement to catch him before he collapsed completely. "I cleared the sector, Doc," he gasped out, blood bubbling up on his lips with each labored word. "Did I do good?" "You did good, Ranger." Tears streamed down Sarah's face, mixing with the cold rain. "You did so good. Now stay with me. That's an order. Stay with me." Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing rapidly closer. Blue and red emergency lights began flooding the loading dock area. A silver sedan screeched to a sudden halt behind the police line. A 58-year-old woman with elegant silver hair jumped out of the driver's seat, yanking a small blonde 5-year-old girl out of the back seat behind her. Genevieve Hawkins, Dominic's mother, and little Ivy. his only daughter. "Daddy!" Ivy broke free from her grandmother's grip and sprinted toward the stretcher, where paramedics were frantically working to stabilize her father. "Daddy, please wake up. You promised me you'd come home. You pinky promised." Dominic's eyes fluttered open at the sound of his daughter's voice. Even through the haze of blood loss and shock, that small voice cut through everything. "Ivy, baby girl, Daddy's here. Don't go to sleep, Daddy. Please don't go to sleep like Mommy did. Please." Sarah watched the scene from the shadows nearby, hot tears streaming down her face despite the cold rain. Genevieve slowly approached her. For a tense moment, Sarah fully expected accusations, suspicion, demands. Instead, the older woman reached out and took Sarah's hand gently in both of hers. "You saved my son's life tonight." "He saved mine first," Sarah replied quietly. "Multiple times." Little Ivy looked up from her father's stretcher and spotted Sarah standing there in the shadows. "Are you the lady who helped my daddy?" the girl asked with heartbreaking innocence. "He was having really bad dreams again, wasn't he?" Sarah slowly knelt down on the wet concrete to meet the little girl's bright blue eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. Your daddy had some very bad dreams. But he's going to be okay now. The doctors are going to fix him right up. Will you come visit us sometime? Daddy needs someone to help make the bad dreams go away forever. Grandma tries, but she doesn't know how." Detective Roy Callahan appeared suddenly at Sarah's elbow. "FBI tactical team is about 5 minutes out," he said in a low, urgent voice. "If they find you standing here when they arrive, you're going to disappear into some black site somewhere and never come out." Sarah looked at Dominic one final time, at little Ivy's hopeful, tear-streaked face, at Genevieve's eyes filled with gratitude. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver coin, her old unit's challenge coin. She pressed it gently into Dominic's bloody palm and closed his fingers around it. "I'll find you," she whispered close to his ear, "when the ghosts finally stop chasing me. I promise." Ivy watched her with wide eyes. "You're leaving, but you just got here." Sarah gently touched the little girl's cheek. "I have to go away for a little while, sweetheart, but I promise I'll come back. Can you take care of your daddy for me until then?" Ivy nodded solemnly, with all the gravity a 5-year-old could muster. "I'll make sure he eats his vegetables and goes to bed on time." Despite everything, Sarah smiled through her tears. Then she turned and vanished into the rainy Chicago darkness. 6 months later, Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. Dominic Hawkins sat in a wheelchair in the peaceful rehabilitation garden, his right leg still in a brace, but his eyes finally clear for the first time in years. His beard was neatly trimmed. The haunted, desperate look that had lived in his face for so long was completely gone. Little Ivy sat contentedly in his lap, her bright blonde hair shining like gold in the warm afternoon sunlight. A nurse approached with the day's mail. One plain white envelope had no return address whatsoever. Inside was a single handwritten note. "Heard you're walking again. Don't rush it. The world still needs giants who know how to be gentle. I finally found all the evidence about Raven and his smuggling operation. He's going to spend the rest of his miserable life in a military prison. He'll never see daylight again." Meredith was innocent. More than innocent, she was a hero. She died trying to expose the truth and protect her fellow soldiers. Make sure Ivy knows that when she's old enough to understand. Maybe one day when the ghost doesn't need to hide anymore, I'll finally knock on your door. Until then, take care of our girl. Ghost. Ivy peeked curiously at the letter in her father's hands. "Who wrote that, Daddy?" Dominic smiled softly, looking toward the distant horizon with something like hope in his eyes. "A very special friend, sweetheart. Is she the pretty nurse lady who saved you from the bad dreams?" "Yes, baby girl." He kissed the top of her head. "She is. Is she coming back?" "I think so. I hope so. Good. Ivy nodded with the absolute certainty only children possess. I've been saving a drawing for her. It's me and you and her and Grandma having a picnic. I drew the sun really big so everyone would be warm and happy. Dominic held his daughter close, the silver unit coin still clutched tightly in his other hand. That sounds perfect, sweetheart. She's going to love it. 1 year later, a doorbell rang at a modest house in the quiet suburbs of Chicago. Dominic walked to the front door, walking now. No wheelchair, no cane, just a slight limp that would probably never fully disappear, and opened it. Standing on his front porch was a woman with soft brown hair and a gentle, genuine smile. No oversized scrubs this time. She wore a simple blue sundress and looked like someone who had finally, after a very long time, stopped running. "Hello, Sergeant," Serafina said quietly. "I heard you might need a nurse." "Miss Sarah." Ivy came sprinting from the backyard at full speed and launched herself directly into Sarah's arms with complete abandon. "You came back. I knew you would. I told Daddy you would. I prayed every single night." Sarah held the little girl tight against her chest, tears streaming freely down her face. Genevieve appeared in the hallway behind her son, one hand pressed over her heart. "I told you, Dominic," the older woman said softly, her own eyes glistening. "Some people are worth waiting for, no matter how long it takes." Dominic stood frozen in the doorway, completely unable to speak, unable to move. Sarah looked up at him, still holding Ivy in her arms. "I ran for 4 years," she said softly. "I convinced myself that I didn't deserve to live when everyone else on my team died, that their ghosts would follow me forever as punishment for surviving." She reached out and took his hand. "But someone very wise taught me that even the biggest, strongest lions sometimes need the smallest, quietest mouse to show them the way home." She squeezed his fingers. "I'm tired of running, Dominic. I'm so tired of being a ghost." He pulled her into his arms. Ivy squeezed happily between them, giggling with pure joy. 3 people stood together in the doorway, bathed in warm golden afternoon sunlight. Genevieve wiped her eyes with a tissue and smiled. "Welcome home, dear. Welcome to the family." That night, long after Ivy had been tucked into bed and Genevieve had retired to her room, Sarah sat on the old wooden porch swing with Dominic. The stars were bright overhead. The neighborhood was peaceful and quiet. "I need to tell you something," Sarah said softly. "Something I should have told you that first night." Dominic waited, his hand warm around hers. "I was there when Meredith died. She was assigned to my special operations medical unit in Syria. When the attack came, I was badly wounded. Couldn't walk, could barely breathe." She paused, gathering herself. "Meredith found me in the rubble. She could have run, could have saved herself. Instead, she stayed. She was dragging me toward the extraction point when the second explosion hit." Sarah's voice broke. "She died saving my life, Dominic. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't save her too." Dominic was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion, but steady. "That sounds exactly like Meredith. She never could leave anyone behind. It's one of the reasons I fell in love with her." He squeezed Sarah's hand. "She would have wanted this. She would have wanted you to live, to find happiness, to stop punishing yourself for surviving." Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder, finally letting go of a weight she had carried for 3 long years. "I think I'm finally starting to understand what she saw in you, Sergeant." He kissed the top of her head gently. "Sleep now," he whispered. "I've got you. You're safe here." The same words she had spoken to him on that chaotic night in the emergency room. The same promise. This time they were both finally ready to keep it. Most people looked at Serafina Valdez and saw a mouse. They saw trembling hands and a shy smile. They never saw the sleeping lion underneath, until the lion had no choice but to bite. Dominic Hawkins wasn't a monster. He was a shattered shield who just needed someone brave enough to hold him up. That night at Mercy General Hospital, a 7-foot giant crashed through the doors searching for a ghost from his past, and a different ghost found him instead. They saved each other. And sometimes that's exactly how love begins. Not with flowers and chocolate and romantic candlelit dinners, but with blood and tears and a whispered promise in the darkest hour. Sleep now. I've got you. You're safe. The end. Caturity.